There's our great group. Jumping in, we'll wait just a second or two. All right, well, we got a bunch of folks this morning, and I'm sure we'll have more jumping in. So it's great to see everybody, and we've got a wonderful interview this morning. So we'll kick it off. So good morning, Coalition. It's great to see everybody today. And we have Lily Gillmor from Transitions Hospice in the Raleigh-Wake County area. And we'll get to that interview in a moment. But first of all, we'll let Allison tell us a little bit about what's going on in the coalition.
Hi, everyone. Good morning and happy Friday. It's nice to see all of you virtually. I have just a couple of announcements. One, I sent a member email on Wednesday. That was September 22nd. Please feel free to visit that member email because it is jam-packed with resources and events. Two specific coalition events that I want to pull out of that email. One is this Caregiving Research and Policies Forum. This is the Caregiving and Patient Engagement Work Group's first forum that they're doing. So we do encourage you to share this flyer. I sent it out yesterday. There's a link to register. It is open to everyone, not just coalition members. So feel free to share that with your network, and we hope to see you next Tuesday. The second event I would like to share with you is the Clinical Practice Forum. This is their 7th forum, and it'll be their last forum for this year. And this will be focused on pediatrics and serious illness, which Lily Gillmor is going to moderate. So I love that we're interviewing her today. Maybe she could talk a little bit more on this. But those are two coalition events that I encourage you to check your member email and register, and we'll see you there. Thank you, David, and welcome, Lily.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much. So Lily, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm really excited.
Yeah, cool. So tell us a little bit about what you did when you were growing up. We talked a little bit earlier, and you mainly grew up in this area, but you were born somewhere else and then came down here. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was born in Philadelphia, and I lived there about 10 years, and then we moved to North Carolina. It's a little shady of why. We've always sort of in the family, when we ask kind of why did we end up in North Carolina, and we sort of get different responses from each parent. So I don't know how we ended up here, but it was great. And I came down here and I lived in Durham and spent majority of my childhood in Durham, and then had the opportunity I went to school actually in Wisconsin, and that was just to get away from the warmth. I thought I wanted snow, and I thought I wanted winter, and I had it, and I got my taste of it, and I decided that I'd had enough, and I really liked the South. So I came back, and my husband and I moved to Nashville for about 3 years, and then came back again, and we settled in Hillsborough, which is where we live now.
Well, that's a tough road to hoe, living in Hillsborough, but we're glad that you're here. So you've got a master's in palliative care. How many programs in palliative care are there?
So there are really two major ones. There's one in Colorado, and then there's one at Baltimore with Mary Lynn McPherson. And they started, so the one that I was in, however many years ago, I can't even remember. It was the first year that they did it, and it was really exciting. I had I think in nursing, there tends to be this push sometimes to work a little bit and then kind of keep getting degrees. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I wasn't sure I really wanted a master's of nursing or if I wanted to be an NP. And I hadn't really kind of found my niche of what I wanted. And when this program started, it was like, oh, okay. So that's why people go back to graduate school. It really spoke to me. And it was just really incredible because it's an interdisciplinary program. So you're in classes and you're doing your role plays and all of that with the whole team, which is such an important part of palliative care. So you're not just in school with nurses, but you're there with physicians and PAs and NPs. And so it was a really great experience. And I feel like definitely helped kind of flesh out what I was doing. And I really, really enjoyed it.
Well, that's great to hear, but I think folks want to know. I would like to know what got you interested in palliative care to begin with. What was it that said to you, okay, I want to work in this very esoteric area that is called palliative care?
When I actually started working as a nurse, I started at UNC inpatient pediatrics, and there was no palliative care. At that point, it was barely adult palliative care had not really even hit the mainstream, certainly not kids. And I was, when the floor that I was on, you usually had kind of a primary nurse. So you were assigned anytime we had a lot of kids with chronic illness, and they would come in and you'd be sort of assigned to them throughout their lifespan, really. And I had one child who had 2 failed liver transplants. He was about 2 years old, and they were looking at a third, and just sort of trying to put it together. And as a new nurse, you're anxious about everything, not sure what you're doing, not sure of your confidence level. But just in putting it all together, it didn't seem to me that he was going to actually survive a third transplant. And we were doing rounds one morning, and I just brought the question up. Parents were not there, but I just said, so kind of why are we doing this? What's the end goal? And do the parents know it's probably not going to work? And I was reprimanded and told, why would you take that hope away from parents? And it was really jolting for me to think that, oh gosh, so their concept of hope is we've done everything we can do, even though we don't know if it's going to work, which was so different than mine. And it really kind of shattered my whole perception of what I was doing. And I, really struggled and felt like, oh no, I chose the wrong career, nursing, and nursing was a second degree. And I was like, oh God, I'm just never going to find the right career path. And that was the time my husband actually got a job transfer, and we went to Nashville, and I had the opportunity to work on a mobile pediatric unit, which was really, really cool. So we went to schools, we went to Title I schools, and we had this bus that was basically just a clinic, and we did health education and immunizations and vaccinations. And it was really good. And it was what I needed to say, okay, so this is good stuff we're doing. Of course, it was a public health project, so it got defunded. And in looking at, okay, what do I do now? Because I did not want to go back in the hospital. And I had my first child, and I had a friend who said, oh, I have this great job being an admission nurse for hospice. And I said, no, because in nursing school, the one area I said I would never go into is hospice. And she said, no, it's like so easy. It's great. You do 2 admissions a day. You can do this. Looked really good for my schedule. And she was wrong. It was not easy. It was really difficult. It knocked me back. However, I all of a sudden found my people, and it was really exciting. So I was like, oh, so going back, these are the people that are saying, what do you want? And let's give people information and let them make a choice of what their hope is. And I was really fortunate that this program happened to have a pediatric program as a part of it, which was pretty unusual at that time. And because I'd done kids, I was the first one they'd pull if they needed an extra nurse. And I just fell in love with, oh gosh, this is all of it coming together. So this is all the ped stuff, which I adore. Plus now these are all the people that are asking the right questions and doing the right things. And I just sort of fell in love with that. And it had been my goal to be able to just continue with both of those throughout my career.
Wow. So that's quite a pathway that you took. Now, was this initial one in Nashville, or was that after you came back?
Yeah, no, it was in Nashville. It was actually called Alive Hospice. And they're very similar to Transitions. They were founded the same year, very similar populations. So it was very comforting when I came back and found Transitions, because it kind of felt like coming back home to a similar group, which is really, really fortunate to find.
How did that feel when you began to realize, okay, some of those early perceptions that I had and got reprimanded for were actually intuitive and were the positive kind of thing to do?
Felt really good. It felt, I think I had really struggled, even when I loved the mobile clinic job, of just that it was so damaging, and I really misjudged nursing, and I really misjudged this career. And it was really terrifying for me. And I have a lot of discomfort when I go back to that floor. It's just that feeling of so out of my skin. And I think that was that first feeling of being who I was and being able to practice with people that got it. And just, I felt in my skin, and I felt like I was actually me and able to do what I'd hoped to do as a nurse while still not giving up any part of me.
Very interesting. Huh. So you decided to move back to North Carolina. What brought that about?
I really love North Carolina, and I did not love Nashville, which I get some flack for sometimes because people are like, how could you not love Nashville? It was not my thing. Wasn't a good match. And it was when my oldest child got sick, and I think he got like rotavirus, and my husband and I both got it, and we were like, wow, we can't do this without family nearby. So that was really the final kind of, let's go back where we have all these people who are there and who can jump in and who can take care of him when both of us are sick, or give us a break, or give us a respite. Because my mother and sister still live here, and are a super big part of my kids' lives. So it was really that wanting to get back to family. The bonus for me was they were in North Carolina, so I got to come back to North Carolina. But that was really what precipitated it, was just to go back and, be back to where we were and have the support that we wanted.
Cool. So you found Hillsborough. Did you move right to Hillsborough?
No, we actually moved back to Durham, and as our family expanded, so I have 3 kids, and my mother lives with us, and my husband, prior to the pandemic, has always worked from home. We had the 3 kids in a room together, and I think it was when my eldest was about 8, and he kind of looked at us and said, I need to talk to you. He was like, I can't live in a room with my brother and sister anymore. And we were like, that is actually very reasonable. At 8 years old, we can start looking at it. And it became clear that expanding the house was not going to be a great idea. And we looked in Durham, and we're like trying to buy a house in Durham. We could never get one that was the right size. And we just sort of stumbled out, because I've always loved Hillsborough, and we managed to get in right before Hillsborough blew up as well on the housing market. So we're able to find something that fits everybody. And because we were getting it for my husband, who worked from home, really well set up for the pandemic, when all of a sudden all of us were working from home. So it was an added bonus.
Well, that's good. That's good. So then you found Transitions, or they found you. I don't know which it was, Laura.
Yeah, I found them, and when I got in there, then Laura found me.
Okay. All right. And so you told me that she hired you, and you didn't think you were going to be working necessarily in pediatrics at that point.
Yeah. At the time, Transitions didn't actually have a pediatric program. And I went to be a nurse navigator in the palliative care program, because it was simple and there was no call. And I was like, this will be so stress-free. And it was. What I did not know is they'd done a feasibility study for a kids program, and we're really just waiting for funding. And so Laura hired me for the future kids program that I was unaware of. So when the funding came through, she said, oh, hey, guess what? This is actually why I hired you. Come on and do this. So it was great. It's been a very incredible experience to build a program from the ground up. A little more work than I thought for the palliative care navigator job, but it's been worth every second of it.
Cool. So you're going to be chairing or moderating our forum next month.
Yeah.
Without giving too much away, what are some of the things that you want people to know about pediatric palliative care and the program that you're running?
I think to me, the most important thing is for people to appreciate the need for palliative care. I think we tend to go to one end or the other, and we hear pediatric palliative care and immediately start spiraling into dying children. And for sure, obviously, we have a hospice part. We do see a lot of kids. We do work with a lot of families through the death of their child. But in looking at serious illness for kids, the palliative care piece, that added support, that collaboration, that establishment of goals throughout a conversation and throughout that child's life versus at the end or during a crisis, is so important. And it's also really less scary. The majority of our kids on our service are on our palliative care service, and we've had them, some of them almost since the beginning of the program. We have kids for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So it's really not all about kids right at the end of life, but it's just such a crucial piece of pediatric care these days. We've hit this point where, NICUs are able to give children who are born so much earlier a much better prognosis, and they get out of the NICU and they grow up, but a lot of times they have a lot of problems. And so we have these kids who need coordination of care and who need support and need someone to sort of just, again, give the parents a voice and see how we can help and have their voice heard throughout their child's kind of care journey. And that's just such a crucial thing. And I think it continues to grow and will continue to grow and grow. And it's just, I think, really important that people can kind of disconnect from it being scary and really see it as this really valuable resource.
Hmm. Hmm. A lot of people say, including my wife, gosh, I just couldn't do this with pediatrics. I'm fine with hospice and I'm fine working in palliative care, but I can't do it in pediatrics. What do you say to them?
I definitely, I like that people can recognize their limits. There's nothing worse than, someone in a situation they don't feel comfortable in. That being said, I always say it's the best kept secret. I think Allie can speak to this, but pediatrics is incredible. And I think one of the things for me, and I challenge people if they come and say, oh gosh, well, I can't think about kids dying, is that kids are dying. And not thinking about it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And being able to provide that to families and give families the choice, I can't imagine anything worse than if something happened to my child and me not being able to have a choice of where they died or who was there to assist and support. And kids are really fun. Kids are still kids. They still, does not matter if they are sick or have any kind of disability, they are still really fun and they're kids and they want to be kids. And so it's a lot of fun. And parents, I think they also sometimes get a bad rap of, oh gosh, you have to deal with parents. I could never do that. And our parents are some of the best parts because they are so grateful and they're so appreciative. And it's such a privilege to be kind of invited into these people's world and be a part of that. So I always say, I hear it. I know it sounds scary, but really it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I forgot to actually invite people to sign in and let us know who they are and where they're from, but they've gotten used to doing that, so we're all doing it. So I don't know if anybody has any questions they want to ask Lily, but I think of somebody. I don't know why it seems perhaps more in the pediatric world that you have to be almost a bit of a philosopher to really understand what's going on with life and why people are having their lives cut short as we would see it. What are your thoughts about that? Do you see yourself philosophically, in a different mindset than perhaps some of your colleagues that are dealing with older folks?
Yeah, I think, it's a similar, I always talk to people about it's a spectrum of age, and we are all given a certain amount of time. And there are some that get a really, really long amount of time, and there are some that get a really, really short amount of time. But everybody really wants to maximize what they've got in that time. And I think for me, I think it is very philosophical, and that is how I view it, in that it is the worst, and it sucks that kids die, and it's not fair, and all of those things, completely agree. But I see it that we still have that. There's that time period, and it's limited. So how do we maximize it, and how do we give that child the same depth of life that the 100-year-old had, and support that family in making that happen?
Mm-hmm. That's very insightful. Can you give us an example of one of the cases, without obviously telling names or anything, that really impacted you?
Oh yeah, sure. So we had, I think one of the ones that's impacted me the most was a young baby. It was a baby who had a catastrophic diagnosis. There's some cancer diagnoses that out of the gate we know are going to be fatal. And the question is, do we try to give treatment to maybe extend their life a little bit? By a little bit, I mean months. Or do we say, okay, we're going to take what we've got? And this family, I remember when the referral source called me and said, I've got this family, and they said, I guarantee you're going to go in and you're going to want to convince that family to do all the treatments they can to extend this child's life. And I said, no way. And I went in, and this child's smile lit up the entire, and I was like, oh my God, yes. What do we do to keep this child alive as long as possible? And this family was so intentional in their thought process and their decision making. And I loved, he was 4 months old, and they included him in all of their decisions, which I loved. And they
4 months old.
4 months old, yes. And
Wow.
the way they included him was, they would sit down as a family, the three of them, and talk about treatments. And they really, when they were deciding, do we do it, do we not? And they would give him something and watch him. And they just felt if he seemed uncomfortable, if he got sick, then that was him saying, no, this doesn't work. And they ultimately did one treatment, and he was sick and he had a miserable night. And they said, okay, that was him telling us nope, and we're letting him guide us. They're also very intentional of making their own decisions separately and then coming back together to talk to each other, which I think, to me, it was really a great lesson in, having parents take that moment by themselves to figure out where they are. Because so many times they're given the diagnoses and the prognoses together. And it's really hard sometimes when you're trying to think about your partner's feelings as well as your own, and making decisions and how much that can influence each other. So having that time apart and then together. And once they made that decision, they really just made his time left phenomenal. And they had their list, and they had their family, and they had their supports. And it was just an incredible way to see this, and then to advocate. That was something that was important to them as families that decided not to do a treatment, which would have had a terrible outcome. And they got a lot of flack from people of, well, why would you not try everything? And they said, well, we're doing everything. It's just that our everything looks different than what your everything looks like. So that family has always made a huge impact on me.
Wow, that's very insightful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Charlotte Sweeney, who is herself a physician, a retired OBGYN, asks, does your work help you to be a better parent and listen more deeply?
I love that question. I think in some ways, I'm definitely not any kind of magic parent. Just, I don't know, makes better. I will say, I think it deepens my appreciation for my children. Doesn't mean I don't get angry, and it doesn't mean they don't drive me up the walls, but I think that I have a level of gratefulness or level of gratitude for my children that I would not have otherwise. And to really look at, I think I weigh a lot, and it's something all of us do, and our spouses, I know, are always kind of like, oh dear God, like stop looking at everything as, oh my God, they could be dead, they could not. But it really does affect when you're looking at decisions, and I'm looking at how hard do I want to push something and where is a line. It really helps kind of frame what I have. And I think that I'm so appreciative for my kids every day on a level that's just, I wouldn't have otherwise, for sure.
Excellent. So Charlotte has a bit of a follow-up to the story that you gave. She says, do you facilitate parents listening to their children? And I would maybe even reframe that a little bit by saying, how do you facilitate that?
So it's something that one of the nice things about starting a program is we can really set the foundation of what are really important, values for us as we move through. And one of them has always been that we will never lie to a child. And that's something that's been very important. And that's not to say we're not saying we're going to go in and say, why, hello, we're a palliative care team and you have a catastrophic diagnosis. But it's more that if a parent says, you can't say this to a child, then we frame it of, we hear that. We are not going to lie to, if a child asks us, am I dying or what is happening? Then we are happy to facilitate that conversation. Kind of our first response to parents, if they say that, because it's not uncommon, or siblings is another one where they might say, please don't tell the sibling, we don't want them to know. And we ask kind of what's the why behind it, of we hear that and we recognize that, and we don't want to diminish that feeling because that's a very important piece that they're coming out with. but trying to get to the what is it that makes them feel that way. And I would say probably 99% of the time, just exploring the why is what kind of opens up and takes some of that fear away and takes some of the scary away, and then facilitates a conversation with the child or with a sibling. Because honestly, if the child is, really older than a baby, but if a child can vocalize and understand anything, so kind of starting school years on, they usually know that something's wrong, and that a lot of them know they're dying. And a lot of them, especially older kids, one of their biggest concerns is I don't want my parents to be sad. I'm really worried about my parents. So they know they're dying. They're okay with it, or they're at least in a place that it's okay. But they're so concerned about their parents. So we definitely do a lot of facilitation with kids and parents.
Fascinating. So what kind of transitions do you see? Don't worry about the background noise. What kind of transitions do you see? I know you work at a place called Transitions, but among both children and their parents as they progress through the program that you have?
I think, it's different for every family. I think one of the big pieces we see are, I think, that communication piece of communicating with their child on a different level. I think the confidence, it's really scary to have a sick kid. And I think seeing them grow with confidence, another very common thing we get with kids who are admitted to our hospice level of care is the kid can't die at home. No matter what, I hear you, but they have to go somewhere else. And it's sort of similar to that other question. It's okay, we absolutely hear that. And they don't have to. And we also are very clear with families, if you want a hospital death, we will absolutely facilitate it. But that comes from a place of fear and unknown. And so I think that's one of the biggest transitions we see is the majority of our parents end up with their child having a home death. And it's, again, that support and the confidence that they get and just having someone to talk with them about what this is going to look like. So I think that's one of the biggest ones we see.
Fascinating. Charlotte says, your work is amazing. Communication and transparent exploration of the why and the why we try to protect one another through fear of the unknown. Thank you very much. Looking forward to the forum next month.
Thanks,
is there something that else that you want to share with us about, particularly as you facilitate this forum, that in kind of anticipation of that?
I would just say I encourage everyone to come. The people who are coming are 4 people near and dear to me. The 2 physicians, one is the Duke complex care physician, one is UNC. They are so vibrant and they bring such passion and life to their jobs. And I just love kind of their aspect of it, because they're further up in that earlier palliative world. So they're not at the hospice end of life as much, but they definitely are involved in those discussions. So I would just really recommend coming. I think it's going to be a really fun group. I think there's a lot of great information that they have.
Cool. So in our last minute, Lily, what can we as a coalition of folks engaged in this whole area of serious illness, what can we do to support you?
The biggest thing is to continue to advocate, is to continue to talk about that children are sick, talk about the fact children die, take away some of the scary stigma of it, because it's really scary, and it's totally understandable if you don't talk about it every day, but just talking about it more, getting it out there, bringing it up as something that needs to be recognized is so important. And the only way we're going to be able to kind of bring it to a larger level within the state and have people really recognize the need for it.
Wonderful. Well, this has been a great half hour. Man, it just flew by. Lily, we're so glad that you're with us in the coalition and that you're talking about these things with us. And thank you for sharing your life with us.
Thank all of you. It was really great. I really had a great time.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll see you all soon. We've got another great Friday Facts next week. But for now, thank you, Lily, and we'll see you all soon. Have a great weekend.